She was a virgin, a maid, and ran from something she never told anyone. He was a millionaire, dangerous, and collected secrets and scars. When the two crossed paths in that forgotten mansion, nothing could stop what came next. If you love stories of love and romance, watch until the end. You won't regret it. Subscribe to this channel and comment where you're listening to this beautiful story from. Let's continue. This story sparked your interest. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. And we'll continue. No one knew exactly where she came from. But on a damp, foggy winter morning, Mira appeared at the iron gates of the Sterling Manor. An old file in her hands, her eyes as empty as someone who had lost everything. And her silence was not submission, it was resistance. She was 28, her hair tied back with a crooked clip, her skin pale as the mist and her gestures precise, like someone who had learned how to pass unnoticed. She claimed to be a domestic worker, and the forged documents she presented confirmed it. But Mira's wasn't there just to clean windows, polish banisters, and sweep away the dust of past generations. She had come to confront her past, or perhaps unknowingly, to meet it again. The manor rose high in the Ton Blue Ridge Mountains, like an ancient, sleeping body, colonial, covered in ivy that seemed to devour its columns, with corridors that whispered untold stories. Mira's new master, Jasper Sterling, was as enigmatic as the house itself. Heir to an Koku incense and old traders empire, Jasper had lived in seclusion since the disappearance of his wife, Sophia, who had been embroiled in a scandal of abuse, madness, and an alleged separation pact. The judiciary closed the case. But the media did not. The city whispered. And Jasper, 42, his body sculpted by rage and his eyes like glowing embers, had become a legend and a threat. In the first days, Mira barely saw him. He would appear at night, wandering the inner garden, or locking himself away for hours in a room lined with Ottoman fabric bearing ritualistic symbols. One night, she caught him bleeding in front of a cracked mirror, as if he wasn't looking to see his own face but a monster hidden within. She didn't ask. She simply cleaned the floor with the precision of someone who understood the weight of others' pain, but she was not ordinary. There was something about Mira that Jasper couldn't decipher. It wasn't beauty, though she was beautiful. It was a presence, a kind of silent calm that stripped him of his power, and above all, an absence of fear. She didn't tremble. She didn't flee. She watched. And he, accustomed to controlling, dominating, shaping, found himself trapped by that gaze, like a wounded dog on the edge of a precipice. In the third week, Jasper began to test her. He would leave sharp objects forgotten in random places. He would provoke her with questions whispered in the dark. He would disappear for days and return as if expecting to find her gone. But Mira's remained. She cleaned. She observed. She took notes. At night, she wrote in a notebook hidden beneath her room's floorboards, describing in suffocating words the desire growing within her, a desire to be taken, but also a desire to understand him. One evening, while cleaning a forgotten greenhouse, Mira's found a sealed box containing old letters, among them one written by Sophia, days before her mysterious disappearance. In the letter, she revealed disturbing things. Jasper's wife suffered from dissociative disorders and was involved in a psychological game with her husband, where pain, pleasure, control, and sacrifice mingled to the point of destruction. But the most shocking was a final sentence. If another woman ever crosses this house, tell her the cycle must be broken, otherwise she will be just an echo of me. Frightened, Mira began to have nightmares. She dreamt of voices in the house, of Kati, Jasper suffocating her while she smiled, of walls whose fabric came alive, of a child crying in a locked room. At dawn one night, after following a strange noise, she discovered a secret passage behind the library. At the end of the passage, a small room contained a photograph, a woman identical to her but dated 1972. The following days were filled with suppressed anxiety. Mira tried to maintain her composure, to continue her tasks, but the ghost of that letter and photograph haunted her. Every corner of New Sterling Manor seemed to hide a secret darker than the last, and the gazes of the few remaining servants, an elderly gardener named to Uncle Gabriel, and a silent cook, Aunt Catherine, seemed laden with unspoken warnings. On a stormy night when the entire manor lost power, Mira Mowbray found herself alone in the kitchen, barely lit by candles. Jasper too appeared as a shadow at the threshold. He said nothing at first, only watched her with that intensity that seemed to want to strip not her body, but her soul. Finally he spoke. "Why are you still here, ma bonne Mira? Any other woman would have already fled." She withstood his gaze as the rain lashed against the windows. "Perhaps I'm not any other woman," she replied in a voice that wasn't hers. Deeper, older, Jasper had approached slowly, as if fearing she would vanish. His fingers brushed Mira's cheek, just a light touch, but it was enough to send an electric current down her spine. "There's something about you," he murmured. "Something familiar, as if I've known you in another life." The candle between them cast dancing shadows that seemed to tell their own story. In Jasper's eyes there was recognition, a flicker of something beyond desire. It was a need, a search, a fear. Or perhaps in this life itself, Mira Dietz whispered, feeling like she was uttering words that weren't entirely hers. The storm outside intensified. Thunder briefly lit the room, revealing Jasper's expression, surprise, confusion, and for a moment terror. He suddenly pulled away. "You shouldn't be alone in the dark," he said in a hoarse voice. "There are too many shadows in this house that might devour you." The next day, Mira awoke with renewed determination. For while Jasper's words had disturbed her, they had also ignited an undeniable curiosity. At breakfast, Aunt Catherine served her coffee with an unusually warm gesture. "The master left early," the old woman said, looking towards the window. "He always does when memories haunt him too much." Mira seized the opportunity. "Aunt Catherine, how long have you worked here?" The cook looked at her with eyes that had seen much, since before Master Jasper was born. "I served his father, Master Arthur, and before him his grandfather. This house holds the secrets of 3 generations of the Sterling family. And me, Sophia," Mira ventured. "What was she like?" Aunt Catherine, his face clouded. "Beautiful as a jasmine flower and fragile as glass. She came to this house full of life and withered little by little. These walls—" The old woman lowered her voice. "These walls absorb the soul if you don't have the strength to resist them." Mira felt a shiver run down her spine. What really happened to her? "Don't ask what you don't want to know, my child," Aunt Catherine replied, turning back to her stoves. "Some truths are like knives. They wound you from within." That day, while cleaning by Jasper's study, Mira couldn't resist the temptation. Cautiously, she began to examine the drawers of the antique desk. In the last drawer, she found a journal bound in red leather. Opening it, she discovered it belonged to Count Sophia. The first pages were full of hope, love, plans for the future. But as the months passed, the writing became erratic, obsessive. It spoke of visions, of a feeling that someone else inhabited her body, of rituals Jasper performed in the manor's cellar. "Sometimes when he looks at me, I know he doesn't see me. He sees someone else, someone he lost, and I become an empty vessel to be filled with the ghosts of his memory." A noise in the hallway startled her. She quickly put the journal back in its place and pretended to clean when Jasper entered. He looked at her intently, as if seeing through her lies. "Did you find anything interesting while you were snooping?" "Mira." His voice didn't sound accusatory, but almost expectant. "Just dust, sir," she replied, meeting his gaze. "This house is full of dust and memories no one dares to shake off." A mysterious smile appeared on Jasper's face. "Perhaps that's why I hired you. You have hands that aren't afraid to get dirty with the past." He approached her, so close that Mira felt the heat radiating from his body. Without warning, he took her hands in his, studying them as if they were an ancient text he was trying to decipher. "Working hands, but with pianist's fingers," he murmured. "Did you used to play beep, Mira?" "My mother taught me. A long time ago," she replied, feeling a lump in her throat. "Sophia's piano hasn't been played in years," he said, slowly releasing her hands. "It's in the east parlor. Perhaps you can awaken its strings from silence." That evening, Mira found the piano, a magnificent black Steinway, covered in a thin layer of dust. As she sat down, she felt as if she were invading the sacred space of an abandoned temple. Her fingers trembled on the yellowed keys. She began with soft, uncertain notes, but soon the music flowed like water through her hands. It was a melody she didn't remember learning, yet her fingers seemed to know it by heart. She was so engrossed that she didn't notice Jasper's presence until he spoke. Moonlight Sonata. It was my mother's favorite. Mira stopped abruptly. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have... No, he interrupted. Continue, please. There was something in his voice, a vulnerability he hadn't shown before. Mira resumed the melody, and this time poor Jasper Beard sat beside her on the bench. His proximity was intoxicating. Where did you learn to play like that? He asked, his eyes fixed on her hands. I don't know, Amira confessed. I simply remembered it, as if it had always been inside me. Jasper gently took her chin, forcing her to look at him. There are many secrets in your eyes, Mira. Sometimes I think you didn't come here by chance. What if I told you you're right? She answered impulsively. Jasper's face changed. A shadow crossed his features. Then I'd have to ask you who you really are, and why you're here. The moment was broken by the arrival of Uncle Gabriel, who entered the parlor agitated. Sir, there's someone at the gate. A man who says he knows Miss Mira. Mira's heart leaped. She wasn't expecting visitors. No one knew she was there. Jasper stood up, the magic of the moment completely dispelled. Let's see who your mysterious visitor is, he said with a coldness that contrasted with the intimacy they had shared moments before. At the main entrance, a man in his mid-30s was waiting. Seeing Miravu, a smile lit up his sun-bronzed face. Miradu, I finally found you. She looked at him confused. She didn't recognize him. Excuse me, do we know each other? The man seemed surprised. I'm Hugo, don't you remember me? I worked for your father in my Comsas Newport tool. I've been looking for you since the accident. Jasper watched the exchange with narrowed, calculating eyes. My employee does not receive visitors during her working hours, he interjected authoritatively. If you have something to say to her, you can return on Sunday, her day off. Hugo looked at Jasper with clear annoyance. It will only be a few minutes. It's a family matter. In this manner I decide the priorities, Jasper replied, his voice sharp as steel. And now I suggest you withdraw. A tense silence hung between the two men. Pamukara felt the electricity in the air like before a storm. Finally, Hugo relented, but not before handing Yases Miras a small box wrapped in brown paper. This belonged to your mother, he said in a low voice. I think you'll want to keep it. As Hugo left, Amira clutched the box as if it was something precious and fragile. Jasper watched her with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. I didn't know you had family looking for you, Amira. Neither did I, she replied honestly. My mother disappeared when I was a child. My father never spoke of her, and he passed away years ago. For a moment, Jasper's mask of harshness cracked, revealing something akin to pity. Open it, he said, gesturing to the package. I want to see what secret from the past has arrived at my home today. With trembling fingers, Mira opened the package. Inside was an old silver locket with intricate ancient indigenous carvings. Opening it, she found a miniature photograph of a young woman holding a baby girl. On the back, an inscription, Carla and Mira, Sterling Manor, 1995. The air left her lungs. She looked up at Jasper, who was staring at the locket with a ghostly pallor. Did you know my mother? Mira asked, her voice barely audible. Jasper took the locket reverently, his fingers brushing hers. Carla Lawson, he murmured. She worked here in this manor almost 30 years ago. She was my father's personal assistant. Mira's world began to spin. The scattered pieces of her story began to find their places. My mother never told me about this place. I grew up believing she was a waitress in New York City. Jasper closed the locket with a sudden movement. There are stories best left undisturbed. Mira. Some truths are like knives that wound you from within, she finished, remembering Aunt Catherine's words. But I'd rather bleed with the truth than suffocate with lies. That night, Mira couldn't sleep. The locket weighed on her chest like a promise and a curse. Her mother had been in this manor and had known the Sterling family. Was this why Mira felt such a strange connection to the place? Why did Moonlight Sonata flow from her fingers as if it had always been there? At dawn, determined to find answers, Mira went to the only place she hadn't yet searched, the cellar, Sophia had mentioned in her journal. The entrance was behind a heavy bookshelf in the incense and audion storeroom. With effort, she managed to move it enough to slip through a narrow opening. The air there was thick, heavy with dampness and stagnant time. By the light of her trembling flashlight, Mira discovered a circular space with symbols drawn on the floor and walls lined with old mirrors. In the center, a stone table carved with figures she recognized from folklore, underworld deities and symbols of resurrection and reincarnation. In a corner, a carved wooden box caught her eye. Opening it, she found old photographs, yellow documents, and a leather-bound book that looked like an ancient book of secrets. The photos showed Arthur Sterling, Jasper's father, next to a woman who was without a doubt her mother, Carla. In some photos they were embracing. In others she held papers while he signed documents. But most shocking was a birth certificate inside a sealed envelope. Mira Sterling Lawson, born October 12, 1995. Father, Arthur Sterling. Mother, Carla Lawson. The paper slipped from her trembling hands. Her entire world collapsed and rebuilt itself in one devastating moment. Her mother hadn't just worked at the manor, she herself had been born there. And Arthur Sterling, Jasper's father, was also her father, which meant Jasper was my half-brother, she whispered to herself, the words burning her throat. I see you finally found what you came looking for. Jasper's voice startled her. He was at the bottom of the stairs, watching her with an unreadable expression. He didn't seem surprised. You knew, Mira's accused, standing up. I knew who I was from the beginning. Jasper advanced towards her slowly, like a predator stalking its prey. I knew you were Fiend Carla's daughter the moment I saw you. You have her eyes and her way of tilting her head when you think. But I wasn't sure you knew. Why did you hire me? Why did you let me into your house knowing I was my sister? He finished with a bitter smile. My half-sister, to be precise. The Sterling family's great shameful secret. My respectable father, Arthur, begets an illegitimate daughter with his assistant. The harshness of his words struck her like a slap. Where is my mother? What happened to her? Jasper's face clouded. My mother took care of it. Eleanor Sterling didn't tolerate competition. When she found out Carla was pregnant, she threatened her. She gave her money to disappear, never to return. But Carla was brave. Or foolish. She returned when you were 5, demanding that my father acknowledge you, that he give you your place in the family. Mira Fay felt her legs give way. She leaned against the stone table. And what happened? My mother confronted her. There was a terrible argument. Odgut fell down the stairs. It wasn't... Jasper paused, choosing his words. It wasn't intentional, but it was convenient. My father covered everything up. Carla officially disappeared. You were sent away with distant relatives of hers. Tears streamed down on Mirami's cheeks. Her whole life had been a lie. Her mother hadn't abandoned her. She had fought for her until the end. And why did you look for me now? Why did you let me into your life after all these years? Jasper moved closer, taking her face in his hands with an intimacy that now seemed perverse in the light of truth. Because I needed to know if you were like her. Like whom? My mother. No, like all of them. Like my mother. Like Sophia. Like all the Sterling women who end up trapped in a cycle of obsession and tragedy. His eyes burned with a feverish intensity that frightened Mira. What happened to Sophia? Jasper. The truth. He suddenly released her and turned towards the mirrors lining the walls. Sophia discovered this place. She discovered the book. He pointed to the ancient book of secrets Amira Cow had found. She became obsessed with the idea that the Sterling family history was cursed, that we were doomed to repeat the same patterns. To fall in love with women who resembled us too much. Mira Mule looked at the photos scattered on the floor. Carla, her mother, bore a striking resemblance to Eleanor, Jasper's mother, and she herself, she realized with horror, was almost identical to Count Sophia. Sophia believed in reincarnation. Jasper continued. She believed that all of them, all the Sterling women, were the same soul returning again and again. She began performing rituals down here, trying to break the cycle, as she called it. She became unstable. Did you institutionalize her? Amira dared, remembering the rumors. I tried to help her, but she was already lost in her delusions. One night she disappeared. She left a note saying she had found a way to break the curse, and that she would free both of us. He moved closer to Mai. Mira. Again, his eyes gleaming in the cellar's gloom. Then you appeared, with Sophia's face and my father's blood, like a ghost returning to torment me, or to save me. Mira recoiled, suddenly aware of the danger. You're as obsessed as she was, Jasper. This isn't an ancestral curse. It's a sick family that has normalized toxic relationships for generations. He laughed, a hollow sound that echoed off the stone walls. You think so? Then explain this. He picked up the ancient book of secrets and opened it to a marked page. Why do they all look alike? Why do they all end up with the same fate? Why do you and I feel this? Connection that goes beyond the usual. It's a coincidence. Or maybe the Sterling men simply have a type. Mira replied, trying to keep her composure. There's no magic or curses here, just dysfunctional family patterns. Then why did you come? If you don't believe in destiny, what exactly brought you to my door? His voice became soft, almost hypnotic. You felt it too, didn't you? That sense of belonging. As if you'd been here before. Mira couldn't answer, because deep down she knew he was right. Something inexplicable had drawn her to Sterling Manor, something deeper than just searching for her past. The silence between them became thick, almost palpable. Mira felt like she was on the edge of a precipice, about to fall into an abyss from which she might never escape. But she also felt a strange calm, as if she had been walking towards this moment her whole life. I need time, she finally said, picking up the locket and photos. I need to process all of this. Jasper watched her with a mixture of disappointment and understanding. Time is precisely what we don't have enough of in this family, he replied bitterly. But take it. Just remember that some doors, once opened, cannot be closed again. Mira ascended the cellar stairs, feeling the weight of Jasper's gaze on her back. Upon reaching her room, she closed the door and threw herself onto the bed, overwhelmed by the revelations. Her mind was a whirlwind of unanswered questions, of terrifying possibilities. Was she truly trapped in a mystical cycle as Sophia had believed? So had she simply fallen victim to the manipulations of a disturbed family? And most disturbing of all, why, despite knowing Jasper was her half-brother, did she continue to feel this strange attraction to him? A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. It was Aunt Catherine, carrying a tray with herbal tea and a look of genuine concern on her wrinkled face. I brought you something to calm your nerves. My child, the old woman said, entering and closing the door behind her. The walls of this house have ears, but they also have a tongue. They told me what you discovered. Did you know? Did you know who I was? The cook sat beside her with a tired sigh. I knew you were Scarlett's daughter the moment I saw you. You have her same way of being silent, and I knew this day would come when the truth would be revealed. Aunt Catherine, what really happened to my mother? Jasper says she fell down the stairs, but your mother wasn't the type to fall, the old woman answered firmly. Carla's was strong, determined. She came to claim your rights, to demand that Arthur acknowledge you as his legitimate daughter. Eleanor's, Jasper's mother, couldn't allow that, not just because of the scandal, but because she feared Arthur would favor you. He always had a soft spot for Carla. Do you think Mrs. Jewel Eleanor? Shahmira couldn't finish the sentence. Not directly. Eleanor Sterling never soiled her own hands, but she had influence. She knew powerful people. Carla simply disappeared, and you were sent away with her sister to Newport. But then who raised me? I thought it was my father, but a good man agreed to take care of you. Perhaps an old suitor of Guy Carla's, I never knew for sure. The Sterling family has its ways of arranging embarrassing situations. Mira was trying to absorb all this information when another thought struck her. And Sophia, Jasper's wife. What really happened to her? Aunt Catherine's face clouded. That poor girl. She came to this manor full of illusions. Jasper hadn't seemed to truly love her at first. But this house, the old woman looked around as if the walls could hear her. This house has a way of corrupting the purest love. Do you believe in the curse? In the cycle Sophia mentioned? The cook rose, smoothing her apron with trembling hands. I don't know if it's a curse or just the Sterling family's sick blood, but I've seen enough to know there's something dark here, something beyond what we can understand. Before leaving, she paused at the door. Be careful, my child. You've already seen how women who get too close to the men of this family end up. That night, Mira couldn't sleep. Aunt Catherine's words echoed in her head, alongside images of the cellar, the paintings, and her mother's locket. She felt trapped in a web of secrets and lies, unable to distinguish truth from manipulation. At dawn, she made a decision. She needed to talk to Hugo, the man who had given her the locket. He seemed to know her family, and perhaps he could shed light on all this mystery. Taking advantage of it being Sunday, her day off, Mira quickly dressed and left the manor without saying goodbye. Sterling Village. The nearest village was small and quiet. Its cobblestone streets and colourful houses contrasted with the oppressive atmosphere of the manor. Mira asked for Hugo in the central square, and an elderly man pointed her to a tavern on the outskirts. The Agave Inn was a modest but cosy place. Hugo was sitting at a back table as if he had been waiting for her. Seeing her, his face lit up with a smile. I knew you'd come, he said, gesturing to a chair opposite him, though I didn't expect it so soon. I need answers, Mira replied bluntly. How did you know my mother? Hugo took a sip of his beer, studying her with narrowed eyes. I worked for Arthur Sterling for years. I was his driver, his bodyguard, whatever was needed. I knew Carla when she was his assistant. She was an extraordinary woman, brave, intelligent. Did you have a relationship? Both Indies. We were friends. Good friends. I admired her. And when things got complicated, I tried to help her. Do you know what really happened to her? Fico's expression hardened. Eleanor Sterling ordered her silenced. I can't prove it, but I know it. There's someone... Arthur fired me shortly after. He threatened me to keep quiet. But I never forgot my promise to Carla, to look after you if anything happened to her. Why show up now after all these years? I've been watching you from afar, he admitted, making sure you were okay. When I found out you got a job at the manor, I was terrified. As if you were walking straight back into the wolf's mouth. Mira fiddled with the locket between her fingers. Do you know anything about a curse? About a cycle that repeats in the Sterling family? Jamesi Hugo leaned towards her, lowering his voice. The Sterling family has a dark history dating back to the colonial era. It's said that the first Sterling man made a pact with ancient entities for power and wealth. And the price was that each generation would fall into a cycle of fatal attraction between close relatives. Forbidden love that always ends in tragedy. That's superstition, Mira Camus protested. Perhaps, but I've seen enough to know there are things science can't explain. Our Sophia believed it. She became obsessed with breaking the cycle. Did you know her? Enough to know she was sinking into madness. Or perhaps she was seeing a truth the rest of us refused to accept. Hugo pulled an envelope from his pocket and handed it to her. Sophia gave me this before she disappeared. She said if someone showed up looking for answers to give it to them. With trembling fingers, Amira opened the envelope. Inside was an old key and a note written in an unsteady hand. To whoever comes next, the answer is in the abandoned church, under the tree of sacrifice. Only you can break the cycle, but you must be willing to give up what you desire most. Which church? Mira, Seward asked. There's an abandoned church east of the Sterling property. It dates back to colonial times. The locals avoid it, they say it's cursed. Mira, you put the key and note in her bag, feeling that every answer brought more questions. Hugo, do you think I should leave? Get away from all this. You should, he replied without hesitation. But I also know you won't. You have the same look your mother had when she decided to face the impossible. Returning to the manor that evening, Mary found Jasper waiting for her on the veranda, a glass of mezcal in his hand, and his gaze lost in the mountain horizon. Did you find the answers you were looking for in the village? He asked without looking at her. How did you know? This is my land, Mira. Nothing happens here without my knowledge. Mira sat beside Jasper, on the veranda watching as the sun began to set behind the mountains, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples. For a few minutes neither spoke. The silence between them was no longer unsettling, but laden with complicity, shared secrets, and half-revealed truths. "There's an abandoned church east of the property," Mira finally said. "Millionaire and Sophia Babasiudas left something there. Something important." Jasper swirled the mezcal in his glass, watching how the amber liquid caught the last rays of sunlight. "The Church of Lament," he replied in a distant voice. "My grandfather forbade us from approaching it when we were children. He used to say it was a place where the living and the dead could speak, where time folded in on itself. Sounds like a story to scare children." "Perhaps. Or perhaps he knew something we don't." Jasper looked at her intently. "Do you want to go there?" The question hung between them like a dangerous, tempting offer. "I have to," Mira replied. "I need to understand." "You won't do it alone." Jasper quickly drained his glass. "I'll accompany you at dawn. The church has its own rules. It's best visited when day and night meet." That night, as she packed a small backpack with a flashlight, water, and the key, Sophia had left her. Mira heard a soft knock on her door. It was Aunt Catherine, carrying a small cloth bag in her hands. "I know you two are going to the church tomorrow," the old woman whispered. "Take this with you. It's white sage and frankincense. The ancients say it protects against dark influences." Mira accepted the bag, touched by the woman's concern. "Have you been there before?" "To the church?" Aunt Catherine's eyes clouded. "Once, many years ago. I saw things no human should see. Things that defy what we think we know about time and space." "What were these things, Aunt Catherine?" The old woman took Mira's hands in hers, wrinkled and warm. "I saw all the Sterling women at once, as if they were superimposed in the same place, in different times. I saw Kutin Melina, so I see what reader." A shiver ran down Mira's spine. "But I've never been there before." "Time doesn't work the same way in that place. It's like a mirror reflecting past and future simultaneously." Aunt Catherine squeezed her hands. "Be careful what you wish to find, my child. Some truths are too heavy to bear." At dawn, Jasper was waiting for her beside two saddled horses. The morning mist covered the agave fields like a ghostly shroud, and the cold air cut like small knives. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked, helping her mount. "There's no turning back now," Mira replied. "I need to know the truth, whatever it is." They rode in silence through fields silvered with dew. After half an hour, they reached a clearing where a huge ancient sycamore tree rose like a guardian. Beneath its shadow, partially hidden by vegetation, lay the ruins of a small colonial church. "The Tree of Sacrifice," Jasper murmured, dismounting. "It's said that the first Sterlings performed rituals here, mixing Catholic beliefs with ancient tribal practices." The church was smaller than Mira had imagined. Its stone walls were covered in moss and climbing plants, and the roof had partially collapsed, allowing a shaft of morning sun to penetrate to the stone altar. In front of the entrance, there was a rusty wrought-iron door. Mira took out the key. Sophia had left her and with trembling hands inserted it into the lock. The mechanism yielded with a creak that seemed to awaken the surrounding forest. The interior smelled of damp earth and stagnant time. On the walls, faded frescoes depicting biblical scenes mingled with ancient tribal symbols could still be seen. The altar, carved from black stone, showed inscriptions of intertwined serpents. "This doesn't look like a traditional Catholic church," Mira observed. "The first Sterlings were known for their liberal interpretations of Christianity," Jasper replied, running his fingers over the carved symbols. "My grandfather used to say that our ancestors found something here, something older than the arrival of the Europeans. Ancient knowledge that granted them power but also demanded a price." Mira's advanced towards the altar. In its center was a circular slab that looked like it could be moved. "Help me with this," she asked. Jasper. Between them, they managed to pull the heavy slab, revealing a dark cavity. Inside was a carved wooden box, similar to the one Mira had found in the manor's cellar. With a rapidly beating heart, Mira took out the box and opened it. It contained a journal bound in black leather and an ancient black onyx mirror, its surface reflecting light in a strange, almost liquid way. "Sophia's journal," Jasper whispered, recognizing it. Mira began to leaf through it cautiously. The first pages contained meticulous notes about the Sterling family history, family trees, And the patterns Dulpam Sophia had identified across generations. Every 3 generations, the cycle repeats with greater intensity, she had written. A sterling man falls in love with someone who shares his blood. A woman appears at the manor, always with the same face, the same fate. And it always ends the same way, with blood and loss. In later pages, Sophia's writing became more erratic, more obsessive. I discovered that they are not coincidences. We are the same fragmented soul, returning again and again to try to break the pact. The mirror shows the truth. It shows us all at once. Me, but also them. Eleanor T. Karlaku and all who came before. And whoever comes after me. The last one who can break the cycle if she is brave enough. Mira looked up from the journal, a lump in her throat. She was delusional, she said, trying to convince herself. This is all madness. Jasper Mace picked up the black onyx mirror, studying it with an unreadable expression. What if she wasn't? He asked in a low voice. What if there's a deeper truth to all of this? He extended the mirror towards her. Look at your reflection, Mira. Really look. With trembling hands, Mira took the mirror. At first, she saw only her own face, pale with tension. But as her eyes adjusted, the image began to shift. Her face seemed to melt, to transform. For a moment, she saw Sophia looking back at her. Then her mother, Carla. Then women she didn't know, dressed in clothes from different eras, all with similar features like variations on the same theme. She dropped the mirror with a muffled cry. The black onyx surface did not break when it hit the stone floor, but continued to display changing images, superimposed faces like a film playing at high speed. Did you see? Sir Jasper asked, his voice strained. Did you see what Sophia saw? Miracle recoiled, bumping into the altar. It's impossible. It's some kind of optical illusion, a trick. There are no tricks here, Jasper replied, approaching her. Only truths we've avoided for generations. He took her hands in his, and Miracle felt that familiar electric current, that connection that defied reason. Why do you feel this way when you're with me? He asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. Why, knowing we share blood, do you still feel this attraction? It's not a perversion, Mira. It's recognition. Our souls recognize each other across time. Mira wanted to pull away, wanted to deny what she was feeling, but she couldn't, because deep down, she knew he was right. What she felt for Baitum Jasper transcended the physical, the temporal. It was as if every cell in her body knew him, yearned for him, from a place older than her own existence. Sophia. Believed we could break the cycle, Jasper continued. She believed there was a way to free us from this recurring fate. But she was afraid of what that entailed. What do you mean? Jasper pointed to the last page of the journal, where Von Sophia had written in large, trembling letters. The only way to break the cycle is to accept it fully. You must unite knowing who you are with full consciousness. The act of forbidden love, performed with knowledge and acceptance, will break the original pact made through deception and ignorance. Mira felt the air leave her lungs. The implication was clear, terrible, and at the same time, strangely inevitable. You can't really believe that, and she began, but stopped at Jasper's expression. In his eyes there was a mixture of horror and determination, of repulsion and desire, the same conflicting emotions she herself was experiencing. Sophia tried to break the cycle in her own way, he said. She thought that if she disappeared voluntarily, if she removed herself from the path, she could change the pattern. But I know now she was wrong. He moved closer to Mira until she felt his warm breath on her face. We've been repeating the same mistakes for generations, loving each other in secret, denying our connection and ending in tragedy. Perhaps the only way to free ourselves is to face the truth, however terrible it may seem. The sun had fully risen now, bathing the church in a golden light that made the dust motes in the air sparkle like tiny stars. Mira felt like she was on the edge of a precipice, about to fall into a decision that would change the course of her life forever. There's another way, she said in a trembling voice. There has to be. They rode back to the manor in a silence charged with tension. The revelations in the church had opened a chasm between them that seemed impossible to bridge, and at the same time had drawn them disturbingly closer. Every shared glance, every accidental touch during their ride together, sent waves of confusion and forbidden desire through Mira. Upon their arrival, they found Hugo waiting for them at the entrance. His expression was serious, worried. "I need to speak with you," he said to Mira, casting a suspicious glance at Jasper. "Privately. We have no secrets," our Jasper replied with a strained smile. "Whatever you want to tell her, you can say in front of me." "Not so," Hugo insisted. "There are things only Mira should hear." The tension between the two men was palpable. Mira intervened before the situation escalated. "It's all right, my Jasper. I'll talk to him on the veranda. We'll be in plain sight." Jasper had nodded stiffly and withdrew into the house, but not before giving Hugo a final warning look. On the veranda overlooking the agave fields, Hugo pulled a yellowed envelope from his jacket. "I found this among Carla's belongings before she disappeared," he explained. "I didn't want to show it to you before because I feared you weren't ready." Mira opened the envelope with trembling fingers. It contained several photographs and a marriage certificate. The photos showed her mother next to a man who was not Arthur Sterling. They looked happy in love. "Who is he?" Ferracine asked, confused. "Your real father," Hugo replied gently. "Michael Saunders. He was the foreman at the manor when your mother worked here. They fell in love and secretly married. Arthur didn't know about it." Mira felt as if the world had stopped. She examined the marriage certificate. Carla Lawson and Michael Saunders, married on May 5, 1994. The dates matched. "But the birth certificate I found," she murmured. "It said Arthur Sterling. It was my father." Hugo shook his head. "A forged document. Arthur arranged everything when Fee Eleanor discovered Contaide Carla was pregnant. He assumed the child was his because they'd had an affair months before." Eleanor, furious, threatened Carla. "Your mother tried to clarify the truth, to show this certificate, to explain that the child was Michael Minus, but morning Eleanor didn't want to listen." "What happened to Michael?" "To my real father?" Hugo's expression clouded. "Eleanor had him fired, falsely accusing him of theft. He was forced to flee to Europe. When he returned after learning what had happened, it was too late. Carla had disappeared and you had been sent away." Mira felt her head spin. The entire narrative built in recent weeks collapsed like a house of cards. "So Jaspers and I aren't—" "We're not— You don't share blood," Hugo's confirmed. "There's no kinship between you." A conflicting mix of relief and new confusion washed over Raisty Mira. If they weren't related, how could she explain everything else? The resemblance to Wamusa Sophia, the strange attraction, the mirror, the coincidences. "There's something else you should know," Hugo continued, lowering his voice. "Your mother had a theory about the Sterling family. She believed there was something supernatural about this family, about this land, something to do with an ancient pact the first Sterling man made to ensure the prosperity of his lineage. The cycle's curse," Miras murmured. Carla recalled it the eternal reflection. She believed certain souls were trapped in a repeating pattern, doomed to meet again in each generation, not by blood but by fate. "And did she believe she was part of that cycle?" Hugo nodded. She believed her soul and Arthur's soul had been trapped in this pattern for generations, but she also believed she had found a way out. Michael represented a break in the cycle, a true love untainted by the Sterling family history. Mira was trying to absorb all this information when a sudden thought struck her. Sophia. Did Sophia know all this? Carla wrote to her before she disappeared. She told her about her theories, warned her of the danger. But by then, Sophia was already deeply entwined in a Jasper's obsession, too caught in the cycle. Mira looked towards the manor, where she saw Isame in Jasper's silhouette watching them from a second-story window. "So all of this was manipulation," she said bitterly. "Jasper knew we weren't siblings. He was playing with me, feeding this madness." "I'm not sure he knew," Hugo replied. "Arthur had maintained the lie until his last day. He insisted you were his daughter, perhaps out of vanity, perhaps out of a twisted obsession with Carla, Theo. Eleanor never publicly questioned the paternity. It was more convenient to assume you were the fruit of an infidelity than to admit everything was a mistake." Mira stood up, suddenly feeling suffocated under the open sky. "I need to talk to Jasper. I need to know if he's been lying to me." Hugo grabbed her arm, his eyes full of concern. Be careful, Mira. There's more at stake here than the truth of your birth. This family has darker secrets, and I don't know how far Jasper is willing to go to keep them buried. At that moment, thunder clapped in the distance, despite the clear sky. A strange, almost supernatural phenomenon that sent a shiver down Mira's spine. It seems a storm is approaching, Hugo said, looking towards the mountains. I should go before things get worse. Stay close, Mira requested. I have a feeling I'll need you. As Hugo left, Mira went directly to Jasper's study. She found him sitting behind his desk, contemplating the black onyx mirror they had brought from the church. We need to talk, Mira said without preamble. Jasper looked up, his dark eyes unfathomable. From your expression, seems Hugo has told you an interesting story. Not a story, the truth. Mira threw the marriage certificate and photos onto the desk. My mother was married to the Michael Saunders. He's my real father, not Arthur. We're not siblings, Jasper. Not even half siblings. Jasper's face remained impassive, but a muscle twitched in his jaw. And you believe this story just because Hugo showed you some papers? His voice was dangerously soft. Documents can be forged, Mira. Photos can be manipulated. Did you know? She pressed. Did you know we weren't related and still let me believe that lie? Jasper slowly rose, circling the desk until he stood before her. What I know is that there are truths deeper than blood, he said, taking her face in his hands with a tenderness that contradicted the intensity of his eyes. What we feel, this connection that defies reason, is real. It doesn't depend on who your biological father was. Mira pulled away from his touch, confused and angry. You've been playing with me from the start. You let me believe we were siblings. You pushed me into that horror knowing that... I didn't know for sure, Jasper interrupted. My father insisted until his dying day that you were his daughter, but I always had my doubts. The timeline didn't quite match up. And when I first saw you, when I felt that immediate attraction, I knew you couldn't be of my blood. Then why didn't you tell me? Jasper walked to the window, watching the storm gather over the mountains. Because I needed you to discover the truth yourself. I needed you to feel the horror, the guilt, the forbidden attraction. Because only in that way could you understand the power of the cycle that traps us. He turned back to her, his eyes shining with an almost feverish intensity. Don't you see? All of this was a test to see if you truly were her. If you were the last one, as Sophia believed, the one who could break the cycle once and for all. Lightning lit the room, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. Mira recoiled, suddenly afraid of this man who seemed to teeter on the edge of madness. This has to stop. Jasper. There's no cycle, no curse. Just disturbed people who have allowed superstitions and obsessions to dictate their lives. Look in the mirror again, he challenged, offering her the black onyx piece. Look at it and tell me you don't see the truth. With trembling hands, Mira foretook the mirror. As before, her reflection began to shift, transforming into other faces. But this time, with the knowledge that she was not Arthur's daughter, she saw something different. They weren't just sterling women. They were women who had fallen in love with sterling men. Women drawn to the manor by something stronger than blood or fate. It's a pattern, she murmured. But it's not what you think. We're not doomed to repeat it. Then why are you still here? Jasper asked, moving dangerously close. Why, despite everything you've discovered, do you still feel this pull towards me? Mira Bahman had no answer, because deep down she knew he was right. Even now, with the knowledge of manipulation, of lies, she continued to feel that magnetic pull towards him, that sense of inevitability. The storm finally broke over the manor, with a fury that seemed to mirror the emotional turmoil within Mira. Rain lashed against the windows like invisible fists, and lightning turned the room into a theater of light and shadow. We have a chance no one has ever had before, Jasper said, his voice barely audible over the roar of the wind. We know the truth. We know who we are. We can choose consciously with open eyes. He took her hands in his and Mira felt that familiar electric current run through her body. Stay with me. Mira, let's face this together. Let's break the cycle once and for all. The storm raged all night, as if the elemental forces themselves were responding to the emotional turmoil within Stirling Manor. Mira, unable to sleep, spent hours gazing out her room's window, watching how lightning briefly illuminated the agave fields, transforming them into a dreamlike and menacing landscape. Her mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. On one hand, the revelation that she was not Arthur Stirling's daughter freed her from the horror of kinship with Jasper Yu. But on the other hand, it raised disturbing questions about the nature of the attraction she felt towards him. If it wasn't the call of blood, what was it? Was it skillful manipulation by an obsessed man? Or something older, deeper, as the black onyx mirror suggested? At dawn, when the storm finally subsided, Mirabis made a decision. She needed distance to gain perspective away from the hypnotic influence of the manor and Sue Jasper. With silent movements, she began to pack her few belongings. They would include her mother's locket, the photos Hugo had given her, and Sophia's journal they had found in the church. Evidence of a past she needed to fully understand. A soft knock on her door startled her. It was Aunt Catherine, with an urgent expression on her wrinkled face. "Master, Jasper has disappeared," the old woman whispered. "His bed hasn't been slept in. And there's blood in the cellar." Mira's heart raced. "Blood? Is he hurt?" "I don't know, my child, but he left this for you." The cook handed her a crumpled envelope. "I found it on the cellar altar." With trembling hands, Mira opened the envelope. It contained a note written in Jasper's angular hand. The answer was always in the church. "The tree of sacrifice. If you have the courage to face the truth, find me there at noon. This cycle ends today, one way or another." A shiver ran down her spine. There was something in the note's tone that suggested a dangerous resolve. A final decision. "I have to go," she said, more to herself than to Aunt Catherine. "Be careful." "My child," the old woman replied, pressing a small, cloth-wrapped package into her hands. "Take this with you. It's a relic that's been in my family for generations. They say it protects against the deceit of the heart." It was a small jade amulet carved in the shape of a heart, pierced by a tiny black onyx dagger. Mira put it in her pocket, grateful for the gesture. Before setting off for the church, she decided to contact Hugo. She would need an ally, someone who understood the risks she faced. She left him a message explaining her location and asked him to find her there if he hadn't heard from her before sunset. The path to the church looked different in the daylight after the storm. The colors were sharper, the air cleaner, as if the earth had been purified. The huge sycamore tree stood majestic against the blue sky. Its branches extended like protective arms over the stone ruins. Jasper was waiting for her in front of the altar, dressed entirely in white, a color that contrasted sharply with his bronze skin and dark hair. There was something different about him, a calmness he hadn't shown before, a serenity that was more disturbing than his usual feverish intensity. "You came," he said simply. "Did I have another choice?" Mira replied, maintaining a cautious distance. "There are always choices, Mixie. Mira, that's the lesson we never learned in all our previous lives." Jasper gestured to the black onyx mirror he had placed on the altar. "I've been studying Marie Sophia's journal and the ancient texts of the first Stirlings. I discovered something that changes everything we thought we knew about the cycle." He approached the mirror, inviting her to look. "It's not a curse, as we thought. It's an opportunity. A gateway." Mira approached cautiously. In the mirror's reflective surface, she saw something astonishing. It wasn't just superimposed faces as before. It was a complete scene. A man and a woman dressed in 16th century clothing, performing a ritual before an altar similar to the one before them. "The first Stirling man and his wife," Jasper explained. "They didn't make a pact with dark entities, as the legend says. They discovered something deeper, a point where time folds in on itself, where souls can travel between eras." The image in the mirror shifted, showing the same couple in different historical moments, always before the same altar, always with the same mirror. "They created a bond that transcended time," he continued. "A love so powerful that death itself couldn't break it." But something went wrong. The gateway closed before they could complete the ritual, leaving their souls fractured, trapped in a cycle of incomplete encounters. Mira felt her head spin. It was madness, and yet, as she watched the images in the mirror, A part of her resonated with an ancient, forgotten truth. Are you saying we're reincarnations of their souls? Not exactly. Jasper took her hands, and this time Mira didn't resist. We are fragments of their souls, searching for each other across time. In each generation we meet, drawn inexplicably. But there are always obstacles, always fears, always lies that separate us. His eyes gleamed with an undeniable certainty. Sophia discovered it. She discovered it wasn't about breaking a cursed cycle, but about completing an incomplete ritual. But fear paralyzed her. She was afraid she was wrong, that it was just her obsession. So she fled. What really happened to Sophia? And Miravan asked, suddenly sure that Jasper knew more than he had admitted. A shadow of pain crossed his face. She returned to the church alone. She tried to perform the ritual by herself. But without me, without the other half of the bond, his voice broke. I found her here before the altar. She had used the mirror incorrectly. Her mind was empty, as if her soul had been torn from her body. Is she... Miramada couldn't finish the question. She lives, in a way, in a clinic in New York City. She recognizes no one, speaks not. Doctors say she's as if in a permanent catatonic state. Jasper squeezed her hands tighter. I don't want the same thing to happen to you, Mira. That's why I needed to test you, to make sure you truly were the last one, the one who would complete the cycle. And the story about us being siblings. Was that your test? I needed to see if your attraction to me would hold even in the face of the strongest taboo. And it did, which proves that what we feel transcends any social convention, any modern moral construct, or proves that I'm as manipulable as Sophia, as susceptible to your psychological games. Jasper shook his head, his expression pleading. They're not games, Amira. It's destiny. Look in the mirror. Really look. Mira returned to observing the black onyx surface. This time she saw something that took her breath away. She saw herself and Jasper. But also all the previous couples who had been in their place, like superimposed layers of the same eternal image. And most disturbing, she saw glimpses of a possible future. She and Itama's Jasper had together in a different life, with children, growing old side by side. A vision of serene happiness that made her heart ache with longing. We can complete what they started, Jasper murmured, his voice a hypnotic whisper. We can free ourselves from this endless cycle, find the peace we've sought for centuries. Mira felt like she was on the edge of a precipice. A part of her wanted to believe, wanted to surrender to this mystical narrative of intertwined souls and shared destinies. But another part, more rational, more cautious, cried out in warning. What if you're wrong? She asked. What if all this is just a complex fantasy born of your family's obsession? And what if we end up like Sophia? Jasper picked up the mirror from the altar and offered it to her. Then let me show you something else. Something Sophia he never saw because she was too afraid to truly look. With a fluid gesture, he turned the mirror towards the light entering from the church's crumbling roof. Instead of a reflection, the black onyx seemed to absorb the light, creating a window into another place, another time. Mira saw Sterling Manor, but not as it was now. She saw it as it might have been centuries ago, and also as it could be in a distant future. She saw people she knew and others who were strangers, but inexplicably familiar. She saw entire lives unfolding in moments. The mirror doesn't just reflect, Jasper explained. It connects. It shows us possibilities, paths not taken, the future that could be. He placed the mirror back on the altar and took Mira by the shoulders, his gaze intense and pleading. I'm not asking you to believe me blindly. I'm asking you to trust what you feel. This connection that has been there from the first moment we saw each other. I'm asking you to consider the possibility that there is more to this world than our rational minds can comprehend. At that moment, a ray of sun pierced a gap in the clouds, illuminating the mirror directly. The light bounced off the black onyx surface, casting an intricate pattern onto the church's stone floor. An ancient diagram with symbols what Mira recognized from the ancient book of secrets they had found. The gateway, Jasper whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. It's opening. He extended his hand towards her, a silent invitation. Mira looked at Jasper's outstretched hand, then at the illuminated pattern on the floor. A decision was forming in her heart, transparent and perfect as a diamond born under pressure. "I believe you," she finally said, her voice steady. "I believe there's something else here, something beyond our understanding. But I also believe we have the right to write our own story, free from the shadows of the past." She took Datu, Jasper's hand, feeling that familiar electric current run through her skin. But instead of being drawn towards the illuminated pattern, she led him out of it, towards the church door. If we are truly destined for each other, if our souls are truly connected across time, then we don't need ancient rituals or mystical gateways. We can create our own destiny here and now, as two people who choose to love each other freely. The light in Jasper's face changed, a new understanding illuminating his eyes. "You're right," he said, squeezing her hand. "Perhaps this has been our mistake for centuries, looking for answers in the past instead of creating them in the present." Together they walked out of the church into the bright midday light. The air smelled of wet earth and new promises. In the distance, Mira saw Hugo approaching on horseback, true to his word to check on her safety. "What do we do now?" Jasper asked, looking at Stirling Manor spread out below them like a kingdom awaiting its rulers. Mira smiled, a sense of liberation expanding in her chest. "We start anew. No secrets, no manipulations, no ancestral curses. Just two people discovering if what they feel is real." "And what about the manor? And the Stirling family?" "The manor can heal just like us," Mira replied. "We can transform it into something new, something good. A place where the shadows of the past don't darken the present." Jasper looked at her with a mixture of astonishment and admiration. "You've always been the bravest of us all. Across all lives," he said softly. "Now I understand why you are the last one, the one who finally breaks the cycle." Mira didn't answer. Instead, she looked towards the horizon, where the sun was rising over the cold Blue Ridge Mountains. She felt the jade amulet in her pocket, her mother's locket on her chest, and Jasper's steady presence beside her. She didn't know what the future held for them, whether this attraction they felt would endure in the light of ordinary life, away from the mystical atmosphere of the manor. But for the first time in her life, she felt truly free to make her own decision, not dictated by fate or blood or ancient curses, but by her own heart. And that, she thought as they descended the hill together towards where Hugo awaited them, was perhaps the most powerful magic of all. Months later, Stirling Manor had changed. Doors that had once been closed were now open, windows let in light, and music often drifted through the corridors. Mira had transformed the cellar into an art studio, where she created pieces inspired by the ancient symbols she had discovered, transforming them into something new, something hopeful. Jasper had found a piece he never thought possible. Together they visited Sophia at the clinic, bringing her flowers and reading her poetry, though she remained absent, lost in some corner of her fragmented mind. They decided to use part of the Stirling family fortune to fund her treatment and that of other similar patients. And every night, under the blue Ridgewood stars, Mira and Jasper sat on the manor's veranda, contemplating the future they were building together. Not as souls trapped in an eternal cycle, but as two people who had freely chosen to love each other, with open eyes and honest hearts. The black onyx mirror now rested in a closed box in the library, a reminder that some secrets are best left undisturbed. Some stories don't need to be solved, but rewritten,